Port Dawnspire hung against a violet nebula, a spun-glass ring crowded with ships from 100 worlds. It was where empires shopped, smugglers thrived, and human biology sat on a shelf with a price tag. Near the middle trade decks, beneath blinking glyphs and hissing vents, Veliss Tran watched a crate of human gut bacteria arrive at his Zeloth stall. The crate was utilitarian, a smart foam cube stenciled with hazard sigils, including a stylized human intestine. To most of Port Dawnspire's regulars, that emblem meant unpleasant but useful. To Veliss, it meant barely profitable. He flexed his glossy green carapace plates and scrolled through his ledger. Skin bacteria sold tolerably well as starter cultures. Blood-derived catalysts moved slowly, but at high margin. The gut consortia were the problem. Bulky, finicky, and expensive to sterilize. Waste sludge, he muttered. They export their waste. He highlighted batch D22. Manifest, non-viable terrestrial gastroconsortia. Officially, the cultures inside had been pasteurized into metabolic silence. In practice, full sterilization was costly, inspectors were overworked, and Veliss liked shortcuts. He flicked open a private channel. Dockworker tag B19K. Respond. A lazy voice answered over the clatter of machinery. Yeah? Batch D22, Veliss said. When you run the heat cycle, trim it slightly. Sensors will still see a spike. I will confirm total sterilization. You receive a bonus. How much of a trim? The worker asked. Enough to save energy, Veliss said lightly. Not enough to alarm anyone. Humans overstate their risks. There was a pause, then a grunt of agreement. Credit icons blinked as Veliss sent the bribe. Somewhere in the station's guts, heaters glowed slightly less hot for slightly less time. In batch D22, a fraction of the human microbes survived as more than dead biomass. Veliss saw only the improved margin in his ledger and felt content. 5 decks above, in a cramped human lab carved out of former storage, Dr. Sachi Moribe watched a different batch of gut cultures and felt unease. Port Dawnspire's human consulate had white walls, fresh filters, and instruments that hummed a little louder than the surrounding station metal. Around them, the vast structure was stained and dented by decades of use. Humans were the new tenants. Sachi peered at her console. Gas production curves climbed faster than expected. Metabolic activity stayed stubbornly above the line that should have marked dead. These were certified inert, she said under her breath. She opened a channel. Commander Hale, can you come down here? I think we have a protocol breach. Commander Rauan Hale responded quickly. He arrived, with the alert focus of someone used to trouble that never made headlines. Smugglers cutting corners, dock crews skipping safety steps, station security shrugging. What am I looking at? He asked. Sachi brought up graphs. Control samples from batch B19. They should be pasteurized gut consortia. Instead, some of the microbes are alive. Not just alive, but adapting to the recycler chemistry I used. They're too comfortable. Someone shaved the heat cycle, Rauan said. Most likely, Sachi replied. To save energy, time, or both. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. How dangerous is this? Inside a human? Not at all. This is what keeps us alive. Inside another species' closed systems? She hesitated. I don't know. That's what scares me. They're extremely flexible. They've evolved through centuries of antibiotics and industrial toxins. They metabolize things they were never meant to see. Rauan's mind jumped ahead. Alien recyclers, biotech hulls, warships. I'll log a formal incident, he said, and try to get station security to care. You know how that goes, Sachi said. He did, but he filed the report and pushed it anyway. Responses came back politely dismissive. There were Vorath destroyers to track, Shari tariffs to negotiate. Human microbes looked like a minor housekeeping problem. At 6 p.m. station time, the customer Veliss had been waiting for finally came. The Vorath procurement officer loomed over Veliss's kiosk. Thick bronze armor extruded from his own spine. Voice translated through a throat node. Biomass, he said. High energy, stable, compatible with living hull systems. Cheap. Veliss's sensory tendrils tasted the air, the sharp scent of Vorath ship-grown alloys, the bitter tang of opportunity. I have exactly what a growing fleet needs, Veliss said. Terran intestinal biomass. Officially sterilized, practically vigorous. More energy per unit. The Vorath's eyes narrowed, then relaxed minutely. Vigorous, he repeated. Under documented risk. Acceptable. Fleet Admiral Khorlak authorizes bulk purchase. Veliss processed the massive credit transfer with quiet delight. Cargo bots loaded Batch D-22 onto a neutral Kaliri freighter. The pilot of that ship, Resic, barely looked at the manifests. To him, it was just another job. Line up the vectors, clear Port Dawnspire's control grid, burn toward Vorath space. He had no idea he was carrying seeds for a fleet-wide emergency. When the support cruiser Grid of Dominion received the biomass, Vorath engineers ran basic scans, found nothing alarming, and fed the cultures into the bioreactors that handled waste and converted it into fuel and nutrients. The human microbes woke into a new world. Warm nutrient streams, novel polymers, alien symbiont excretions, trace metals. Their history on Earth had primed them well. They began to eat. At first, Grit's engineers noticed only anomalies. A few degrees extra heat output, unfamiliar gas ratios, faint pitting on organic filter membranes. Adjust flows, the chief technician said. Tolerances acceptable. By the time the heat map started showing thin spots along weapons coolant conduits, the microbes had traded genes, formed films, and infiltrated Vorath hull tissue. When a pressure test snapped a segment of corridor and a section of hull crumpled inward with little resistance, the chief technician learned a new term whispered on encrypted channels: void rot. Port Dawnspire heard it within days. Rauan sat in a dim bar where security heads traded truths off the record. A Shari contact leaned in, her light haze cloak set to sober blues. "The Vorath lost a cruiser," she murmured. "No known enemy contact. Hull failed from inside. They call it void rot. Their biosystems are implicated. Your exports also appear in their supply logs." Rauan felt a cold line draw itself between Sachi's graphs and this rumor. "What sort of exports?" he asked, though he already knew. "Biomass," she said. "From your world. Through Zeloth intermediaries." That night, Sachi ran more simulations. She spliced in what public data she could find about Vorath hull biochemistry. On her console, human consortia grew in silico along Vorath nutrient channels, expressing unexpected adhesion factors and enzymes. "In our guts, they sit in a mucus layer," she told Rauan. "Here, they have room to sprawl. They can digest more than they evolved for. Give them semi-organic hull mesh, and they'll try to eat it." "That's a guess," Rauan said. "An informed one?" she shot back. "And the only way to test it properly is somewhere we very much don't want them to be." He took her findings, and Sachi herself, into the next emergency session of the Galactic Exchange Council. The council chamber was a rising amphitheater of factions. Vorath in their grown armor, Oral engineers in glittering thoraxes, Sherry envoys wrapped in color-shifting veils, Zeloth brokers with restless tendrils, and at the lowest tier, humans at a modest table. Envoy Talisiar of the Shari Concord opened the session with succinct gravity. "We have confirmed reports of catastrophic internal failures on Vorath vessels," she said. "Biological systems corrupted. The term void rot has escaped their censors. We have traced a common factor in affected ships. Recent intake of Terran origin biomass." Murmurs rippled. Scientist Hekrun of the Oral Hive projected patterns of microbial signatures. "These organisms are unlike known Vorath symbionts," they said. "Their genetic fingerprints overlap with sequences registered to Port Dawnspire's human microbe exports." All eyes turned toward Emir Salcedo, humanity's chief negotiator. Emir stood. His posture was careful, his tone steady. "Our exports left Earth sterilized," he said. "We followed agreed protocols. If those were broken, we share blame, but not intent. These are our native gut consortia, not engineered weapons. If you consider them dangerous, remember, they live in every human body you see." Admiral Khorlak's voice, coming through his delegate's channel, was a low snarl. "Your bodies carry things that hollow ships," he said. "Call them what you like. To the Dominion, They are threats. Hekrun's mandibles flexed. From our perspective, they said, there are 3 possibilities: a natural accident, criminal negligence, or deliberate field testing of a human bioweapon. All require different responses. Amir nodded once. Then let's rule the last out together, he said. We have something no other species in this room has: generations of practice managing these consortia. On Earth, they were once our main killers. We learned to live with them. If you want this void rot checked, let us help. Talisiar's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. You would board infected ships? She asked. In Vorath space, under Vorath command? If that's what it takes, Rauan said from behind Amir. We know how to nudge these microbes. You know your ships. Combine that, we have a chance. Silence stretched. Khorlak towered under his sigil. He despised the idea of bringing untested primates aboard proud Dominion hulls. Yet his fleet reports were clear. More ships showing early signs, engines compromised, biosystems misreading invasive films as self. He spoke a single word: agreed. The compromise that followed was tense. A small human-led task force, under Council and Vorath oversight, would attempt to stabilize one flagship, the dreadnought Ravager of Suns. Succeed there, and protocols could spread. Fail, and humanity would face quarantines it could not survive. The ISS Tenacity departed Port Dawnspire with a mixed crew. Commander Rauan Hale headed security and overall mission leadership. Dr. Sachi Moribe led microbiology. Engineer Lena Kovac focused on systems and hull interfaces. Noura Belkadi handled sensors and control nets. Sergeant Jairo Aranda commanded boarding squads. Emir came as political ballast. Envoy Talisiar and scientist Hekrun joined as council observers. Kaliri pilot Resek took the helm. As the nebula faded in the aft view and Vorath patrol spheres glowed ahead, Rauan briefed his team in Tenacity's small mess. We're walking into someone else's war machine, he said. Their pride, their weapon, their home. A chunk of it is apparently being eaten by something that evolved to live in us. We're not there to gloat. We're there to keep a crisis from turning into a reason to end us. Sachi added, we can't sterilize these consortia the way you scrub a counter. They're integrated now. Our best hope is to outcompete and corner them, like we do in our own guts. Jairo smirked faintly. So we're giving a dreadnought probiotics. In essence, Sachi said, and then we're going to give it fevers. Resek's dry voice came from the doorway. I was promised hazard pay, not metaphors that haunt my sleep. They reached the quarantine zone near a world called Nyara Prime. There, among silent hulks and tense escorts, the Ravager of Suns drifted. Even damaged, it dominated the field. Living hull plates flexed with slow pulses. Organic cannons studded its flanks. Along one dorsal segment, however, the skin sagged and shimmered with off-color patches. Khorlak's face appeared on Tenacity's main display, heavy-browed and impatient. You will dock in forward bay. One only, he said. You will not deviate from the path we provide. My ship is sick, not blind. When the airlock cycled, Tenacity's boarding team stepped into a different kind of life support. Vorath corridors resembled ribs, curved and faintly damp, lit by embedded bioluminescent veins. Now, there was an overlay, slick films, pearly patches, threads hanging like cobwebs. Stay off the obvious colonies, Sachi said over the squad channel. Those threads are extracellular matrices. Step wrong and you spread clumps. Jairo led the way, boots careful. Behind him, Sachi collected samples with practiced efficiency. Noura scanned bioelectric signatures. Lena monitored structural integrity through an interface slung over her chest. They reached a junction where the floor drooped. Below, in a maintenance shaft, lay a slush of half-digested hull tissue and microbial mats, pulsing faintly. It's eating the support layers, Lena said. Imagine termites in steel beams. At the central control nexus, the air was thicker, warmer. Neural mesh trunks converged on a core interface panel that pulsed rhythmically. This was Ravager's environmental brain. Admiral Khorlak waited there, armor scarred, expression clenched. You see what your exports have done, he said, nodding toward a secondary display. On it, anatomical maps of the ship flickered with crimson zones, infected conduits, eroded plates, biofilm-clogged vents. Your procurement officers bought unsterilized consortia, Rauan said. We didn't ship live cultures through your back door as sabotage. Argue with my superiors, not me, Khorlak growled. They see Terran origin, Terran advantage, Terran motive. Sachi stepped closer to a sensor cluster, pulling up overlays. You tried heat and solvents? She asked. Everything in our arsenal, Khorlak snapped. The more we burned, the more the rot grew back, tougher. That tracks, Sachi said. You're culling the weak strains and selecting for resilience. That's what happened on Earth when we overused antibiotics. It's not malice. It's evolution. Hekrun's voice came by tight beam from Tenacity's lab, where they and Talisiar watched live data. Uncontrolled evolution inside strategic hardware is an oral nightmare, the scientist said. Your species seems oddly relaxed about it. We're not relaxed, Sachi answered. We're experienced. That's different. She laid out the first phase, flood-infected zones with carefully selected, comparatively benign human strains that could outcompete the most destructive hybrids, plus phages tuned to the most dangerous profiles. Meanwhile, Lena and Nura would manipulate flow rates and valves to steer invasive fronts away from critical load-bearing members. It worked, at first. Jairo's squads planted emitters in junctions, diffusing tame probiotics. In some corridors, the grossest films thinned. Readings showed human host-friendly strains displacing more corrosive consortia. But the ship was big, the infestation old, and the enemy very good at improvising. Hours later, Sachi watched hybrid clusters reappear downstream, sporting modified markers that made them invisible to the first phage cocktails. They're picking up Vorath genes, she said, more impressed than she wanted to be. Adhesion patterns, stress responses. This isn't our microbiome anymore. It's our microbiome plus theirs, braided. Then your old playbook is useless, Khorlak said. Not useless, Sachi said slowly, just incomplete. The second phase required more brutality. We hit the whole ecosystem at once, she told the gathered group in the Nexus. Not just individual pockets. Full system environmental cycling that favors your symbionts and crushes the hybrids. Hekrun made a distressed chirr. You cannot do that blindly. You will collapse vital tissues. We do it calculated, Lena said. I've mapped your life support and hull stress tolerances. Your symbionts can enter hardened states and survive short, severe shifts. Our upstart hybrids can't handle extremes. Nura pointed at nodal diagrams. If we control pressure, gas, mix, and flow timing at this core interface, we can push waves of vacuum and cold and weird atmospheres through targeted sectors. But your network's half compromised. A machine can't improvise around breaks. A human can. Her eyes slid to Rauan. You want one of us inside your ship's nervous system? Khorlak said. To touch what only my captains touch? You want your ship alive? Rauan asked. Or a heroic wreck? The Vorath admiral bristled, then let out the ghost of a bitter laugh. You will take the node, he said. You will stay until my symbionts stabilize, or until the hull shatters. If you run early, I will hunt your people across the stars. Understood, Rauan said. They set up the board. Gyro squads pulled back from deep sectors and focused on clearing paths and placing the last wave of emitters. Sachi refined phage mixes that would synergize with the stress cycles. Lena fed Rauan real-time structural constraints. Nura wired manual overrides from tenacity to the Ravager's central mesh, building a fragile bridge of control. At 10 p.m., with the ship creaking ominously, Rauan placed his gloved hands on the core interface. It was warm and faintly elastic under his palms. It hummed with a low, living current, he began. The first pulses went to weapon coolant trunks. Vents sealed, pumps reversed, atmosphere snapped away, then slammed back in altered form. Invasive markers dipped. Vorath symbiont markers spiked briefly, then settled into hibernation patterns. Good hit, Sachi said. Again. Sector by sector, Rauan rode the ship like a storm. He timed each cycle to coincide with peak microbial division based on Sachi's models. He watched strain on hull braces climb and eased pressure at the last safe moment, guided by Lena's sharp warnings. Feedback surged through the node. The interface was not designed for such aggressive manipulation from an alien operator. Pulses stabbed up his arms, making muscles spasm. Nura rerouted around blown relays, almost faster than they failed. "You're cooking the net," she said. "And yourself. We'll lose both soon." "We're almost through the weapon grid," Sachi insisted. "The worst damage is there. One more wave in the nests feeding those lines and we cut the rot's heart." The ship bucked violently. Somewhere aft, a partial hull breach vented a cluster of already weakened colonies into controlled capture layers. Lena swore. Microfracture gave way in midship, brace integrities dropping. "You have one last full sequence before we risk snapping the spine." Rauan's world contracted to colored sectors on the display, and the burn in his nerves. He cued the final pattern, a wave that would slam through the crew nests and life support vents linked to the remaining hotspots. "Jairo? Status?" he asked, voice tight. "Half my people in Tenacity's Bay," Jairo panted. "Rest nearly there. Give me 3 minutes." "You have 2, Lena said. Rauan didn't wait for more. If he delayed, the hybrids might stabilize into an even tougher configuration. He triggered the final sequence. Ravager of Suns shuddered as if caught in a giant's hand. Atmosphere screamed through vents. Pressure dropped, surged, changed composition. Symbionts cocooned. Hybrid mats, already stressed, tore and desiccated. At the same time, the overloaded mesh in the node sparked. Displays flickered to black, came back in patches. Heat rose around Rauan's hands. Nura shouted something about cutoffs. He barely heard it over the thrum in his skull. The last commands left the node. It didn't matter that the controls failed a heartbeat later. The wave was already moving. Rauan's knees buckled. He slid down the interface, vision tunneling, the afterimage of decaying red zones painting the inside of his eyelids. In the corridors, Jairo and his squad staggered, dragging stunned Vorath crew toward the docking bay as gravity and air did insane things. Infected walls cracked and shed brittle flakes of dead biofilm. A tendril that had menaced them earlier withered mid-lash and broke apart like ash. At the docking limit, Resic kept Tenacity steady, despite the dreadnought's convulsions. "If they don't hurry," he muttered, "we'll be docking with free-floating chunks." On Tenacity, Sachi gripped the console edge as Graf swung. Hybrid load indicators plunged on nearly every metric. Her breath caught when she saw one stubborn cluster clinging near a crew nest, then let out a slow exhale as it finally fragmented under the third pass of pressure cycling. "It's working," she whispered. "It's really working." Lena called hull status. "Brace holding. She's ugly, but she's holding." Then Nura saw Rauan's life signs flicker on her feed. "Rauan's down at the node," she snapped. "He's alive, but barely." Jairo, hauling the last Vorath into the airlock, heard that and stopped cold. "Seal it and go," a Marine gasped. "We've got who we can." Jairo shook his head, jaw clenched. "You go," he said. "I'm getting him." He turned and sprinted back into corridors that still creaked and groaned, trusting his sense of direction and the half-stable deck under his boots. Admiral Khorlak, bracing himself not far from the bay, saw the human running deeper into danger and made a fast, angry decision. He pushed off from the bulkhead and followed. The path back to the node was worse than before. Panels had buckled, some corridors partly collapsed. Jairo squeezed through gaps, scrambling over debris, lungs burning. When he stumbled into the node chamber, Rakur of Sun's nerve center was a scorched mess. The core interface was pitted and blackened. Rauan lay crumpled on the deck, breathing shallowly. Jairo dropped to his knees, fingers fumbling for a pulse. "Commander! Hey! You're not allowed to die here," he said roughly. Footsteps thudded behind him. Khorlak shouldered his way in, expression like carved stone. "Move," the Admiral ordered. He grabbed Rauan under the arms and lifted him as gently as his massive frame allowed. The human's head lolled. His eyes opened a slit, trying to focus. "Ship?" Rauan rasped. Alive, Khorlak said, and strongly inclined to stay that way. Now stop asking and breathe. Jairo took Rauan's legs. Together they heaved him back along the still trembling corridors. Twice, Khorlak's strength saved them when shifting bulkheads threatened to trap them. At the docking bay, Resic's voice came sharp over the comm. "Hurry! My tolerance for docking with shrapnel has limits." They stumbled through the lock. Tenacity sealed the hatch and pulled away on minimal thrust, careful not to stress Ravager's warped docking ring. Behind them, the dreadnought drifted, wounded but intact. Inside, Vorath symbionts slowly stirred out of cyst states. Weakened humans strained settled into niche roles as waste processors and minor constituents. The dangerous hybrids, for now, were gone. In Tenacity's medbay, Sachi hovered over Rauan's bed as medtechs worked. Diagnostic readouts showed nervous system stress, peripheral damage, but a beating heart and stubborn brain activity. "He'll live," she said to Emir, "but he's going to have opinions about my rehabilitation plan." Emir let out a breath that felt long overdue. "Good. I prefer him complaining to him being a revered martyr." Hekrun's analysis over the following days confirmed it. The microbes that had caused the void rot on Ravager had been simple opportunists turned monsters by context. No clever engineering signatures, no unnatural sequences. Just Earth's long training in chemical adversity meeting Vorath hubris in biodesign. Back at Port Dawnspire, the Council weighed blame and remedy. Veliss Tran found himself in the center of that storm. The chain of falsified sterilization records led squarely to him. Confronted with hard data, he tried every argument. Everyone cuts corners. The risk was low. Humans exaggerate their dangers. Talisiar's voice stayed mild. "You bribed workers to ignore protocols," she said. "You lied to buyers. You shipped lively consortia into systems incapable of handling them. Call it greed, not grand strategy, but the consequences are the same." Vorath delegates demanded his execution. The Zealoth Combine wanted a slap on the claws and a quiet reassignment. The compromise made almost no one happy. Veliss would not die swiftly. Instead, he would work under strict supervision in a joint biosecurity project, helping draft and test safer standards for interspecies microbial trade, handling the very organisms he had once treated as harmless sludge. Hekrun watched him don containment gear with a detached sort of interest. "Appropriate," the Oral murmured. He believed risk was minimal. Let him see what minimal risk feels like on his own carapace. The human biological containment protocols passed with only token resistance. Now, any crate bearing human biomass came wreathed in glowing hazard glyphs. Human waste was explicitly listed as a high-risk export. Handling it required training, certification, and crucially human expertise on site. Trade partners grumbled at the bureaucracy, then signed. The same unpredictable biochemistry that had nearly hollowed warships was also uniquely capable. The galaxy wanted it, but it no longer wanted it cheap and loose. Vorath dock officials glared at human ships a little longer at checkpoints, but they also installed Terran-designed filters in their waste systems. Quietly, Dominion shipyards signed accords assigning human biologists to their projects. Admiral Khorlak sent a terse message logged under official channels. "To Commander Rauan Hale," it read, "you endangered my ship and saved it. The Dominion does not forget either. Our hulls now carry your tamed vermin in our waste loops. If they misbehave again, we know who to call and who to blame." Rauan, limping slightly through Tenacity's corridor as he read the translation, snorted. "I'll take that as a compliment," he said. Sachi, walking beside him, smiled. "You should," she said. "For a species that prides itself on chewing through problems alone, admitting they might need us is huge." Port Dawnspire's market decks adapted quickly. Human crates that had once sat near fertilizer stacks now occupied locked cabinets. Prices climbed. Traders whispered new, embellished versions of recent events. And then the Terran gut sludge crept along the pipes and started eating gun barrels. The Vorath Admiral was ready to blow his own ship. But the humans wired themselves into its brain and cooked half their nerves to fry the rot. Turns out every human is a walking ecosystem of potential catastrophes and miracles. On a balcony overlooking the bustle, Emir stood with Talisiar and Hekrun. "It's not the reputation we planned for," Emir said. "We were hoping to be known for art, ideas, music. Instead, hazardous biology consultants." Talisiar's cloak shimmered in amused gold. "Stories stick for their teeth, not their polish," she said. "Your species just demonstrated that even your invisible passengers are hard to kill and valuable in a crisis. That will open some doors, and close others," Hekrun added. "But the Hive Directorate will consult your microbe specialists from now on. We have no desire to learn your lessons the hard way." Emir nodded. "We can live with that." In the consulate lab, Sachi updated a final entry in the file labeled Ravager Protocols. The hybrid consortia, once terrifying, were now reduced to trace niches where they chewed waste and kept to themselves under careful monitoring. They had gone from plague to plumbing. "They just needed to be told where they're allowed to live," she said softly. Rauan, watching from the doorway, thought of human cities, once racked by cholera and dysentery until pipes and norms changed. He thought of the way his species had learned, slowly and painfully, to turn its own filth into fuel and fertilizer instead of poison. "Same as us," he said. "We show up messy. Then we learn." That night, or what passed for night on a station that never fully slept, Rauan lay on his bunk aboard Tenacity, listening to the hum of human-engineered systems. His nerves still tingled faintly from the overload at the node. His body carried a new memory. Being part of a ship's circulatory shock, pulling levers on a scale he'd never imagined. Somewhere out there, Vorath hulls now hosted thin films of tamed Terran consortia, eating waste, excreting harmless byproducts. On paper, they were regulated, boxed into roles. In reality, they carried the same stubborn history as the ones in his own gut. He smiled in the dark. A species that could turn its own intestinal flora into both a near disaster and a solution, and walk away with stricter trade contracts and new alliances, might just deserve its place out here. Port Dawnspire rotated slowly against the nebula's soft light, its docks busy, its markets loud. Among the countless goods changing hands, human biology gleamed behind warning sigils and premium pricing. To some, it was still just filth. To others, it had become proof that humanity's real power wasn't muscle or metal, but an outrageous talent for surviving its own chaos and then teaching the galaxy how to manage it.